I'll tell you something funny I used to do in IIT. And I got good grades, okay. I never had bad grades or anything. I would start studying at like after midnight for the exam that will happen at 8 a.m. next day. Then I'll go and like literally gulp it up from like 1 a.m. to like 6, 7 a.m. Go to the classroom and get good grades, okay. I got like
And that
8
through
from
school.
the.
So officially, I think welcome to podcast for school kids. And so my first question is going to be super open-ended and vague. How's life? What's up? How are you doing? How's the pandemic treated you?
Um, so life for me is a little like sort of roller coaster, especially this year, because I'm quite a hopeless, optimist. But this year has been just non-stop bad news, one after another. Like today itself, like I woke up, I started reading the news on Lebanon, the economy is free falling. Many times I just wish that I didn't understand so many of these things so deeply well. Like I'm like, why do I understand them? Yeah, like a lot of news and just the things that are happening this year are so extremely pessimistic and so extremely like bad. And what I think why I get so like, really sad and bogged down sometimes is because it's not changing people. When the pandemic started, I was like, okay, so there's going to be a lot of damage this year, and the migrant crisis happened, and then Indian economy, like it was kind of in this like real nice state of free fall, and the government or the finance minister were not nearly doing things that I wished or hoped for them to do. At one point, I was just like, please, please, please hire some, competent people. We don't need names or anything. Like just I'm happy to work like 24
I feel
hours in
you.
your office. You don't even have to give me any like credit or something, but
I feel
there
you.
are things which are completely avoidable, like there are lives that are completely, savable and you're not doing enough. So I sort of felt that by August, September, the way that the world would move and the type of things that people will do will shift a lot from the status quo, like business as usual. What I'm sad is that that's not happening. Like, I feel that the inertia in this planet and the inertia of the existing systems is so high that things are not changing. And kind of there, that's where my scatterbraininess, as people like to call it, comes, which is like, okay, what all can I change? Because what I've seen is that once you put your head to wanting to have an alternative world, let's say, like the world is A and you want to have like, B, you can after some point demarcate and have a path and you can make things happen because when we started blue sky analytics it literally seemed very impossible. uh, I have no words to explain how difficult things used to seem. And now in like August 2020, at least when it comes to our work, it's very easy and smooth, and our team is fantastic and we are building the tech really well. So we thought it would be way more difficult than it actually ended up being. So which kind of gives me this hope that if I want to, let's say, end absolutely like end plastic, or really build out a transport system which is based on cycles and EVs and public transport, then there are ways to do it, and it's going to be relatively easy. It's a very fun quote that one of my yoga teachers told me actually. I was like, when you are not able to crack a pose, it seems extremely difficult. It's like, wait, will I ever be able to do that? And I know, like, back in 2013, I was, will I ever be able to do a headstand? Now I'm like, it's so easy. Like, so
Right.
that's where my sort of hopeless romanticism comes about things. But I just, I get sad because not a lot of people think that way. And most people are very comfortable with, inertia and the way things are. It's like, please
You
change.
have no idea how I'm relating to you right now because I always say this that I'm a very idealistic person and I try to balance it with my realism, but then I want to change things and when I can't do that, I'm irritated constantly like what's happening. So
Yeah,
I'm like,
yeah, yeah, no, it's a constant pain. Like, and the thing is that that we can I'm a very big believer in the general goodness of society and people. I think people are exactly. I think people are really, really good at heart. So like August 5 was a very disturbing day, and you see sort of the fact that we're all so good, yet we are able to do such evil collectively is quite like saddening. But then it's like some of us like that's the thing right now because I've sort of set up a lot of things very well at Blue Sky. So I'm quite happy. But I'm like, I want to do the same for like other really screwed up things or, like how do I change things? And yeah, like sometimes it's limiting. Sometimes I think you just have to wait and be patient. So how am I doing long short is it's like a sinusoidal, a sine curve. It's like moves up and down all the time.
Okay, now that you've talked about Blue Sky Analytics, take me back 10 years into your life. Talk me through your school, through IIT, and then to Yale.
Okay. So, so you're 18 right now, right? So you just finished
Yeah.
grade 12.
Yeah.
This is like a fun conversation. I'm really, really happy about this conversation that we're having.
Okay, and also, wait. I heard that you've changed like 5 schools. I don't know.
6.
Somewhere. 6 schools. Yeah, I read. I was like, 6 schools. Whoa. Okay.
Yeah, like I was moving around. Like, I think I was in grade 1, one school, then grade 2, till grade 1 in one school, grade 2 another school, then grade 3 and 4 in one school, 5, 6 in another one, 7, 8, 9, 10 in another, and then 11 and 12 in another. So I went to like St. Mary's Convent, so which is a convent school. I went to DAV, I went to a girls' school. I also went to sort of like a Bal Vidya Mandir, which is like not a Hindi medium, but a small town,
I
school.
get it. Yeah.
So the thing is that since I was changing so many schools and I ended up living with my grandparents and then my uncles and everything, I did not have a constant parental figure because like, your mom and dad, I feel there's always, for every child, there's a constant fight and a power battle with their parents, right? The parents want you to do something and you want to do something else. And, parents are always like, we want this for your good. But I have come to realize that's not the case. It's actually like just a power game. Like they want to have that power on you. They think that they're right or whatever. Like, I mean, the fact that they were not around so much or, I've been shipped to live with my grandparents and they have to have that, like, build up that parental authority on me and it takes time. So I was able to kind of live a much more free life than a usual child, I would say, just by the virtue of moving around and everything. I don't know, like maybe I was rebellious, maybe I wasn't, but I kind of became more rebellious as I went into college, definitely. Like I think, going into IIT for me was one like big step towards freedom. And what it did was quite a fun thing that, in our family, like it's like, IIT is such a big thing. So now they're like, wait, you are in IT, so you have like made it. You are like really smart or something. They don't know that we don't study jack shit in IIT. And it's kind of a pretty terrible institution, I would say. And I don't yet understand in India, why do we have such a hoax around it? Like, for me, it's same as any other college in the world, in India or anywhere. But I know there's a lot of big brand and everything. There's definitely a huge network effect because a lot of my friends from different IITs and all are like founders or they do different things. So, it's easy and they're just one call away. But that in some ways is this elitism and sort of a nepotism. I mean, it shouldn't be that way. But yeah, like for me, it makes life a little easy because you have a very strong network of people who are accessible. But that network should, I think, be more open in calling out the institution for the policies of it and criticize the institution because, we as Indian kids and who study so hard for JEE, like my childhood would be that I don't remember grade 11 and 12 at all because I was just studying for JEE. So like I literally had like sort of puberty in college, like those 2 years were gone. And that's kind of not very amazing in a college. You're called a non-male and it's quite misogynistic and it's a little scarring. I know very few people, very few girls would say this, but it's not a pleasant experience to be called like non-male and ugly when you're just like 17 years old in college and you're still trying to figure out, and which is IIT for you. Like in IIT, this is a common narrative that all the girls, we have males and non-males, all the girls are ugly.
because smart and pretty can't happen together.
Bullshit.
Yeah, yeah, no, I'm not
Utter
even
shit.
kidding. It is so true. And so, I think I even like did not always like dress up or didn't go through that like route when I was younger, because there's a conflict with, if I look pretty and hot, that does that mean I'm dumb? So it took me like 6 7 years by the time I was like 23 24 to be like, wait, I think I can dress up and put on lipstick and still be smart.
My God. And did IT give you that? That's
Yeah,
did,
because it's a very common narrative. It's a really common narrative that you're smart because you're ugly, or if you're hot, then you're getting a job because you're a pretty girl, but not because of your brains or something. It's
but
a
like
pretty,
I think being like looking good and being smart, they're not mutually exclusive, right?
they are not, but like what happens is that narratives have a pretty insidious ways of going into our head, right? So like for instance, even this like skinny is fit narrative that we all subscribe to, right? So when you're called non-male for like 4 years, there are certain things that like sort of just go into your head and you're like, wait, maybe we do a lot of things subconsciously. It takes quite a time to break away from a lot of those wrong things that you've been taught or you've heard from people, uh, and the really skewed gender ratio. I mean, IIT was what, like 700 boys and 35 girls in my class. So that makes life, your friendships, you do have really good friendships. Also, I'm not going to say that I don't have some of the best like guy friends from my time in undergrad, but it requires a lot of de-learning, unlearning. Yeah.
Right. Okay. IT is done now. Yale. I think, and I genuinely want you to like compare and contrast Yale and IT, vis-a-vis like professional and personal front equal parts.
So, like you mentioned, right? Like, I mean, I was your age in grade 12, and for me, IIT was a way to get out of home. Like, frankly, it was a place to go and find independence and freedom, and that happened. And I was like really far from my, parents, and they thought that I've made it in life and that I will have a secure career. So they didn't have that much, like, worry on me. Like, they're like, fine, you do whatever. And that sort of allowed me to just like travel, like drink, like do all sort of worldly vices without like much repercussions. I sort of knacked the art of winning money when I was very young. So in my time in college, I learned how to like go for case study competitions and like win like 25,000 rupees, which is a lot of money for like somebody who's 20 years old, and like learn the art of like buying like cheap booze and all of that stuff. But definitely what I didn't get was education, and I'm quite nerdy that ways. And I think I would have loved a real good education. And graduating from undergrad, like I finished everything, and I was like, I didn't learn anything. Like my mental capacity is like quite similar to the grade 12 level. I did a lot of internships, which were something where I learned, but that was about it. So I really craved good education, I would say. To compensate for lack of classes or lack of good professors, I read a lot of books. Like I was reading like Dostoevsky and Kafka and Kundera. So I was essentially doing a BA in English honors all by myself while in my engineering institute. But like I graduated and I knew that I wanted to go to one of the top universities and I wanted to go to the US and I just wanted to get an education. So that is something that was definitely there. But yeah, like, you're really young. So I was 21 years old when I, at that time, and I kind of was like, okay, CAT, give CAT and then you get it. And that's about it. Or GRE, or go for a PhD in your subject. So I think it was sort of a luck that a lot of those things didn't happen. I didn't feel CAT's things super interesting. And now that I look in hindsight, I genuinely find IIMs to be another reprehensible institution, which just sort of prepares you for a job or something, but it doesn't give you the education that you deserve, essentially. I did not get an admission in PhD in material science. I applied for that in MIT and Northwestern, and I didn't get that. So I was a little sad. But then 3 years later, I got like full scholarship and studying masters at Yale, and I got into Harvard as well at that time. So I was like, wait, everything happens for good. And I don't know, like I was really conflicted between Harvard and Yale. Everybody was like, go to Harvard. So, I don't know why all of a sudden I decided to go to Yale. Like I had never been to the US. I had no idea of what an American institution looks like, what the two cities are like. But somewhere I was like, there was a calling. And I don't think I felt anywhere else more home than when I was in Yale. It was like you have some of the best people in the world trying to educate you. It's a very liberal education system, so you can kind of study whatever you want to study. And that was really important because I wanted to figure out the subjects for myself. Like even if, let's say, it's economics, then I would go and audit 5 to 6 econ courses taught in different schools, like in the econ department, in the math department, in the business school, in the environment school, and then see which one fits me the best, which one is at my level. So, because I came from an engineering background and I was mathematically much more skilled than the rest of the class, a lot of courses in my school were mathematically too poor for me. It was like, wait, you are teaching the same concept in, let's say, a linear equation. Don't do that to me. I need it like more abstracted. So, something was happening, was good, was that I could go to a professor and be like, hey, I would like to take your class, but I don't have the prereqs for it, And he'd be like, I don't care if you don't have prereqs. It's your university. I'm your teacher. You take it. If you feel you can do it, then you do it. And I think, I don't think that in India we are so open and so equal about education system. Education is perceived as for the kid to take, and it's on the kid's skill, like your smartness level, that you will take it. And for teacher, they don't care about it so much. While in Yale, it was, in some parts, a teacher's responsibility. They were really passionate about their subject. They wanted you to learn, and then they wanted you to be like, okay, if you can't learn this semester, you can come and learn it next semester. And that's the main thing. The teachers were really enabling. So I would go and I remember my favorite subject, capital markets. I was not a business school student, and it was quite a famous professor. So I went to him and was like, hey, I want to do this subject. And he's like, so why are you asking me? I'm like, because I'm not from business school, I'm from the environment school. So you think I can take it? He was like, yeah, you can take it. And in a couple of first classes, I was understanding those concepts, but I was still very underconfident. And he was like, why are you always second guessing yourself? Just study it, man. You'll get it. Or if you don't get it, tell me. It's my fault. I'll explain it to you in ways that you get it. And that's what happened. I can recall every single subject I studied in Yale. I can recall every single professor, almost most of the classes, every other thing I learned, all the assignments. And I used to be in library till 4 a.m., not because I wanted to get good grades or something, because Yale doesn't have a grade system as well, but because my subjects were really interesting and I wanted to do them, and my professors cared about things. And, let's say you are 8 weeks into a subject and you are not getting it, you feel that you might not get a good grade, you can still drop it. Right? That's not the luxury that we have in India. Or you can sometimes just audit a subject. So let's say I wanted to brush up on my nanotech again, but I didn't want to do it for grades and take an examination, because I was like, I've done it already. I already have a master's in material science and also don't want to do it. So I could just go and sit in the class, listen to it. I did a behavioral econ. There was a master's class and there was a PhD class. I did the master's one. I really loved it. So I wanted to do the PhD one, but I didn't want to invest so much time for grades and everything. So I just audited it. And I still got it. And the professors would still teach it as equally as they would teach to the students who are taking it for credit. So I sort of graduated with 3 or 4 more credits that I required and things like that. And solely because, you could really go for subjects that you wanted to, and you can pave your own path. There's no pre-designed curriculum that you come and then these are the 24 subjects that you will study for the so it wasn't like draconian that ways.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I'm really passionate about the fact that all students should be able to explore education system that way, because it also makes you explorer. It enables your curiosity. It enables that critical thinking. You're able to think tangentially. Like I ordered a course on contemporary Arab politics. It has nothing to do with environment or economics or any of my major, but I think it was a very enriching course. And you don't have your professors being like, what the hell are you doing with your life, you are so scatterbrained. So for scatterbrains like me, I think university was really good because I could be my true scatterbrain self. So if you're going for education, then you will be able to find courses where or sort of streams or schools which allow you that independence and you can do whatever you want. But yeah, I think there's a domain along which schools like MIT or Harvard or Yale or even the British universities allow for that liberal education. Like some of them have, I think I chose my decision between Harvard and Yale was simply on the fact that Harvard had about 10 courses in first year, which I had to take, and Yale had 0. So it was like, I don't want you telling me what I need to study. It's my education. What are you? So one is that I think the biggest skill is freedom and critical thinking that is subdued in India in such early age. It's sad to watch. And what happens is that you can almost see that, there's a glimmer in eyes of a 12-year-old because they're just very curious and they want to know everything about everything. I got a lot of fractures growing up because I did not know when you fall what fracture you get. And so on and so forth. And I was thinking, what a terrible life one has if they don't have fractures. Because you didn't experimented like with falling enough on your own body, right? So there is obviously, especially today, if you see with the whole EdTech and the whole Zoom classrooms and the grades and everything, we are sucking that curiosity and that freedom and that sort of wilderness out of kids at such early stage. And that's what makes people a homogeneous, robotic employee in a big company. I wouldn't want to hire any of those people because then you can't think straight for yourselves. So I think, obviously Indian education system, especially probably more and more young people need to speak up for the fact that we need a real overhaul with the education system. It's genuinely in 1970s. It's so bad. It's so bad. A lot of coursework is in 1970s. I didn't study in IIT because half the things are so old, I either already knew them or, I'll tell you something funny I used to do in IIT. And I got good grades, okay? I never had bad grades or anything. I would start studying at after midnight for the exam that will happen at 8 a.m. next day. I wouldn't even have notes on me. I wouldn't know what subject it was. When everybody else would go sleep, I'll be like, hey, can you please give me your notes so I can study? And a lot of girls from my class used to be like, shit, you don't even know what the exam is. I'm like, okay, no. Then I'll go and literally gulp it up from 1 a.m. to 6, 7 a.m. Go to the classroom and get good grades, okay. I got 8
school. I've done that through
school. Yeah, I got 8 pointer and all. So the thing is that, and sometimes when you look at those subjects, right, like chemistry, which was sort of my major, or physics, they're such amazing subjects. I can sit with you and I can teach you physics for 6 hours while we're drinking. And you wouldn't get bored. I can promise you wouldn't get bored. So every single subject is so amazing and it's so interesting that, it should be a very fun experience to going to a party or going to a movie, to go to a classroom and study these things, right? But our teachers are really terrible. The biggest problem that we have in this education system is that teachers don't teach because they want to. They teach because it's a job, right? So, one is that you obviously have World Wide Web. So you can obviously access a lot more information than any of the generations before you and me have been able to get. So I think long answer short is that you guys will have to figure it out for yourself. And in some cases, be confident. When you're demanding something, be open that it's a terrible education system, we want a new one, you might be able to get it.
Right. And anyone who'd go to maybe like top Ivy League institutions, they would not come back because they would not.
Yeah.
I am betting on it. 9 out of 10 people won't come back because, I mean, obviously, return on investment is far greater there than it is here, plus the lifestyle and all the other things that you get. Why did you come back?
Two parts to it. One is that I was a Fulbright scholar, so I had to come back. That was like, I mean, I could go to UK or something, but I had to leave the US. The second part is because I was a Fulbright scholar, I didn't pay a penny for my education. I was a full scholarship kid, and I used to get money to actually study every month. So I sort of felt like a obligation to somebody out there, like not God, but just to the world, to actually come back because, you know, I know how badly I wanted to be able to study and get good education and how much I didn't have money to support that. And if I got a scholarship, then, you know, I felt it was the right thing to do to go back for sure. The second thing is actually quite an economic decision. If you look in terms of salary, then definitely you can make a lot of money in the US. But if you look in terms of long-term wealth gain, then you can make much more in India simply because the challenges and the opportunity to do new things is much higher. So if I had to do Blue Sky in the US, I would need $10 million. In India, I need $1 million. In the US, you know, and also like the world has become really global now. So pre-COVID, I was able to live a life which was very mixed between the two continents. Like I could go to the US, I could come back here, I could go somewhere else and, you know, get a lot of my optimism. I used to call my going to the US trips as like going to get optimism again, because not a lot of people there would use the phrase that you can't do this, or are you sure you can do this? This happens quite a lot in India. Are you sure you can do this? Like, like why do you even say it? Just, you know, like I'll tell you funny. When I moved back for 6 months, I didn't actually talk to my mother very seriously or something. I didn't have conversations because I knew that her tone would have that underlying, like, you know, doubts. It's like, are you sure you're doing the right thing? You're leaving a job, you're doing a business. What do you know about a business? You'll fail, like that sort of undertone, and you're already so, like, you know, underconfident. You're starting a business. You're already mustering up every last ounce of confidence you have to like be at your work every day. So I was like, I don't need your doubts more. And I only like started talking to a lot of friends and like, you know, old friends and my parents after getting to a stage which was like, okay, cool. We've made it. Like I can take your doubts now. I can withstand them. So I think coming back to India was partially a forced decision, partially something I really felt was the right thing to do. And I don't think for one day I've thought that it was like a wrong decision. I've been pretty sad at a lot of state of affairs, and, you know, I was like, I was single for a really long time and I was not meeting anybody. So I was like, why did I come back to this country? But I think you do find glimmer of hope from here and there. I think being insecure is a good sign. Like, you know, we should be able to talk about our insecurities. See, nobody can ever become secure. Okay. When you fear is a very natural human response. The most important thing is that as Indian kids, we are very risk averse. We are really scared of falling or failing. We are really scared to break a bone.
Do you think that us being risk averse comes from our families or from the kind of
definitely. I mean, we don't have a relationship with the nature or with the wilderness. That would be the first thing. Like, I built a relationship with the wilderness in my 20s. You know, I first went for a hike or just for a long walk in a forest in my 20s. I didn't go for that when I was like 10 years old or something, right? So we don't go and do things which are fearful, which are scary. We won't do activities which have any element of adrenaline or something. We're physically not engaging ourselves at all. So as Indian kids, we are fairly unidirectional. You know, you get to grade 1, you study hard, you go to grade 10, whatever, you get good grades in school, you go to college, blah, blah, blah. The fact is that you have to be extremely multi-directional, and you should be scatterbrained to experience life, I think. You know, focus has its own place in life, but scatterbrain is good. It makes you experience things that you didn't think you will experience. It makes your life rich. So, a lot of risk averse comes from our parents who were very risk averse. And since as a country we grew up in poverty, our previous generations were a generation of have nots. They couldn't afford to get a fracture because there was no healthcare system. So that's why probably they are such a scared being. But we need to get out of that mold and become a little more courageous. That's the most important thing. And to become an enterprising kid, when I said that quote, it meant that I just wanted to do something. Like I would go travel anywhere. Like I'll get out and I'll go to the Mughal Sarai train station from Vararas and I'll take a train to Calcutta. And I'll just like see around Calcutta. I'll go to Guwahati. I'll go to Chennai, Bombay on like general or very little money. And not a lot of girls were doing that. Not a lot of boys were doing that. I explored a lot of India in my undergraduate because I was like, oh, India, oh my God. Just like, I mean, imagine like you see a city for the very first time in your life, that experience is beautiful and we discount it in the name of that we should be working or we should be preparing for CAT. We need to be earning money. We don't acknowledge how invaluable and amazing experience is it to go alone and explore a freaking city. And it costs nothing. If every Indian kid was to just pick an Indian city and go and explore it all by themselves, or go to a trail or a forest or a hike, or even live in a village for a month all by themselves, that will make them so much more enriched and like so much more valuable experience than all of the Gucci's and Pradas of the world, or all of the like 20 lakh jobs that our parents want us to get. I think, so I was definitely applying for a lot of internships when I was young, hundreds of internships. I didn't care.
It's great that you've mentioned this Gucci and Prada and like a luxury lifestyle. How do you view money? Because
I hate money. Genuinely. I have come to hate money so much that, so money is capital. Replace the word money with the word capital. And capital comes in many forms. Capital comes in the form of human capital, wherein if you're just very smart, you can do things that somebody can't. So it doesn't matter however rich in this world you are, you wouldn't be able to get the kind of education I had, the kind of university libraries I studied in. So, give me like, Gurgaon's richest Punjabi boy and I can be like, dude, I've lived a way better life by the virtue of my human capital, right? You can have physical capital. So let's say my friends who can climb a mountain or who can hike for much longer distances, they're able to experience a world that neither I, with all of my intellectual capital, nor somebody with billions of dollars can, simply because they don't have that physical capital. So once we start to think of money as just one of those things that enable you to do something, just one of those things, then I think a lot of people will view it quite differently. We have too much respect for rich people, man, like too much respect. I feel if as a society we were to make having money as a reprehensible thing, like, it's not cool to have money, probably people will stop aspiring for money. What I felt is, and I definitely want to write about this more, is that people do things because they want appreciation from others. So people want to earn money, not because they want to get rich. They want to get appreciation from others. What if we start appreciating each other for other things, not for money? Short-circuited, no. People want to become rich because it's cool. What if other things became cool, right? So I
adding
find
to that, sorry to cut you, adding to that, I read somewhere you said that you're making you want to make money or you're making money and I'm changing the world. That's not same. So
yeah. No, see, money comes to you. Like, I have made 7,000 rupees a month and I've also made almost 70,000 rupees a day. I've seen it all. I've been able to, go and have ridiculously expensive meals and, play in like millions of dollars and also like bought Beeli because I didn't have enough money for cigarette. But the thing is that if we don't associate that shame that comes with not having money, and we don't associate that pride which comes with having so much money, then, it's different. And I feel we should all do whatever we do, our job, for something more bigger than it. Like, I work on Blue Sky because I really care about climate change. You're doing podcasts for school kids because you really want to take some words from which you've heard to more school children, right? So our purpose has to be something else. Now money comes as a side effect, fine. I mean, eventually I would want to live a life in which money is much less of a thing. But that said, I know that I need capital. Like, I've raised 1.2 million. I would need 10 million soon because I would need to pay more salaries and people need to pay rent. So money should be just that element. When we have, and I think more than money, we should talk about expenses. More than money. Why do you need money? Because you want to spend it on something. Why are we spending on that? Like, why? Like, now every time I go to a mall and I want to spend, because that consumeristic habit is still there. Okay, I feel so guilty, like so guilty. I'll see a lipstick and I'll be like, no, you can't buy it. Palm oil coming from like Indonesian palm fires here, don't buy it. Or let's say a nice, like beautiful t-shirt. Two things. One, so many liters of water that went into it. Second thing, seriously, how many times are you going to wear it, man? You are so lazy. You won't wear it. So if we really trim down on a lot of those expenses, and I know a lot of people say about travel and that travel is expensive. They want to travel the world. I can tell you, I've traveled a lot of world and it doesn't require money. I know, like, when you're 18, when I was 18, I definitely did not know what I wanted to do. I even don't know today. But more you test and try, this is not something I like. I'll tell you, I worked in Wipro for 6 months and I was like, this is not something I'm ever subjecting myself to. Okay, I've been in slightly bad relationships. I'm like, never again. You eat bad food, then you realize, okay, I'm not going to eat it again. But